All right, now with us on Tennis Channel Inside In, a freelance tennis journalist, covers the ATP and WTA exceptionally well, very well versed in the Challenger circuit, spends a lot of time covering the future stars of the sport, hosts a podcast on the Great Shot podcast feed, covering the ATP Challanger Tour every week, which you can hear on the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. First time on the show, welcome to Tennis Channel Inside In, Damian Kust. Damian, great to chat with you.
Yeah, great to be here as well. Fun introduction. It's always kind of, I'm sitting here and I'm listening. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad with that. Definitely a lot of Challenger mentions, which is good. That's kind of the main theme of my career, if you may. But certainly, I try to keep up with everything. And well, let's see how it goes here.
Well, for everyone listening and watching out there, Damian is very young, so he's just starting his tennis journey and already, very, very far along. I know it's kind of weird, right? When you're on the other side of this, you host a show. It's like listening to your life story, just like crammed into like a 20-second intro. So we appreciate you coming on. And I want to start a little bit about yourself before we get into the event in Tokyo, some of the Challenger storylines. So you're a Polish guy, is that correct? And you're somebody that's been very well versed in the sport from the beginning. What was it about tennis that caught your eye in the region of the world that you are, and ultimately what got you hooked on this great game?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it was definitely just, TV. I remember my father watching some tennis matches, but it was just like the slams and everything. But that's how I got into it as well. It was actually the Nadal Djokovic 2012 Australian Open final that I kind of just like watched from start to finish, which is crazy because it's 5 hours and 50 minutes or whatever. So, I mean, it had to be really good to hook me like this. And then it was actually this one guy from Switzerland who got me really hooked. And after watching the Olympic semifinal that year, apparently I love long matches because that was also 1917 against Delpo in the third set. I started becoming like a massive Roger Federer fanboy for a few years. Of course, at some point, Roger Federer had to like step away from the sport. I probably like still was a fanboy up until he left, but around like maybe 17, 18, I started like really getting into the lower levels of it as well. I think for the most part for me, it was just the fact that in Poland, we couldn't really have like any ATP events. Last ATP Tour event was 2008, I think. So I was just thinking, okay, where could I go to have some live experience? I watched, in 2013, I watched Davis Cup, Poland, Australia, great match, actually, Kyrgios, Hewitt, Tomic. And then for like 5 years, I didn't see any live tennis. So I was just thinking, well, I gotta go to a challenger. And I went. I was amazed with the quality. I was just like so stunned that everything is, so accessible that you're kind of part of the action. It's just not like the main tour events looked like on TV, where maybe, you're just sitting in the stands and the players are coming on and there's not that much interaction, if you may. And after a while, I just also like, at the same time, I started like writing some articles and stuff. I wasn't sure yet if it was going to be serious, but then I also just realized, okay, there's no Challenger content. There's no Challenger coverage whatsoever. So I kind of decided to make this my life mission. Well, I mean, is it going well? I guess it's going fine, Could be better, but for now, let's just keep sort of improving and improving the content and working so that hopefully in the future, more people will know and more people will watch Challenger events.
Right, filling that lane too, creating your own path with a lane in an untapped area where there wasn't a lot of coverage in general. And we've seen where, and we'll get to in a second, just how the Challenger circuit and how the game's grown and expanded. So you were writing about tennis for the first time when you were what, high school age?
I was 18, maybe. I think my first article was like Indian Wells 2017. It was just like a match recap of Misha Zverev playing somebody, I think. But it wasn't really serious. Like, I think I started getting into this like really, I think I decided there was this website basically that I was like forming, and then it broke down, and I wasn't sure if I was gonna like join anything else. But I suddenly realized, okay, so that was actually fun. I should look for something else. And then, maybe around like 2019, it was actually Twitter that gave me a big boost of motivation, because suddenly I could see that, the people on the other side of the screen, they're actually there. Like, otherwise I was just writing articles and it didn't seem like anyone was reading them, even though I could see some numbers. Like it wasn't that, that personal connection maybe with the Twitter followers and kind of, seeing that there are some people that actually, I can create a bit of a niche where maybe people will be interested in the Challenger coverage. That kind of gave me a big boost. And well, that boost, thankfully, is still there up until today.
Yeah, I think it's the social media side, there's obviously negatives to it, but you used it in the proper way. And I think it shows you about the positivity there in terms of just getting your stuff out, getting the coverage of the game out, and growing your own path in that regard too. And also you get to see, and sometimes it's not always pretty, but you get to see some real-time feedback that I think, Damian, I've talked about with other people, but you have to kind of develop thick skin right away, especially when you're going to put your work and put yourself out there and understand that. So was that ever an issue for you, just, having your work critiqued and learning to maybe evolve and, get better at your craft?
I mean, definitely, maybe I am a person who like kind of, if I put out, let's say I write an article, and if I put out a tweet with a link to that, I'm not going to look for the next hour, for example.
Okay.
I really don't
Yeah.
want to see it. I mean, at some point, obviously, I like to come back and read it. Yeah, constructive criticism is great. But I am kind of scared of the feedback. But actually, the funny thing is, I don't really get any negative comments, to be honest. Like, I'm not saying this is because, everything I do is great, but probably more so because if I'm talking about a challenger match, like the actual percentage of people who read my tweets who probably saw it is very low. Whereas if you tweet something about something on the main tour, maybe someone is going to have a different opinion. So really the only negative feedback I get is from gamblers. And that's pretty easy to just like phase out, If it's sometimes irritating, I'm excited about something, someone posted a big win, and there's free comments that, I'm sure this wasn't fair. I'm sure this was just, a setup. And it's not great. But yeah, I don't really have the negative experiences, to be honest, that some other people have. I feel like I just really also maybe steer away from some of the like political side of things, and when people try to comment on that and kind of get into these discussions, usually that's where maybe the most negative feedback happens.
For sure.
And I just prefer to talk about the like literally the tennis, what happens on the court rather than off it. So yeah, my experience with social media in this sense is actually overwhelmingly positive.
We're coming into a good time too, being a Polish tennis fan. So you're about to hit your stride with a transcendent women's player and some growth to the games, which can be attributed to, and we can talk about this and we'll get into the current events, Damian, but you have challenger events, you have a lot of lower level events. It'll grow the game regionally. It'll be an opportunity. We're seeing it with countries like Italy as like a blueprint of if you have a lot of tournaments locally, France, which put out a banger of a classic in Orleans recently, but growing the game at the lower level, I think, is very, very correlated to what we see at the pro game at the very top.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, you mentioned some huge countries, but I think even for something like Portugal, I've been to Portugal a couple of times this year, and like anyone you talk to is just praising the system that they have there because, like Italy, France, obviously, they have a lot of resources. Whereas in Portugal, it just seems like they're just like maxing out everything. And it's working great. Like the top players there, maybe not even like Nuno anymore, but I don't know, like Jaime Faria or Enrique Rocha, they have such a good system to actually support them. Like they live basically together in that training center in Oeiras. There's a lot of former tennis greats from Portugal who basically give back and they contribute to their careers. And that sort of these sort of systems, I think really they should be followed. And yeah, lower tier events, this is exactly how you build up, like maybe, okay, because sometimes people look at it and, okay, so like France hasn't had a proper like elite player in a while, right? Like top 5, for example. Sure, but at the same time, they have like 30 players in the top 200. And that's eventually going to result in something. Like it's really what kind of forms the foundation. And that's what you should probably be worried about. And in Poland, yeah, it's getting better as well. I feel like the success that we have right now, of course, with the big names, so like Hurkacz, Świątek, Linet, that was still a bit before things started getting better in the Polish system. But especially this year, I really can't complain. A lot more ITFs in play. Now, actually, this week and the next one, we're going to have indoor pro events as well, which I was really advocating for because so many of our players like playing in faster conditions. Also, it's such a big part of tennis here as well because, I mean, I don't know, we play on clay like 5 months a year and everything else is indoor hard, basically. So, yeah, I really definitely think that these names, even though maybe they didn't emerge from like that revolution yet, they are going to lead to, just more players at the pro level and more events, which ultimately is the cause of success for many of these federations.
Well, shout out to Portugal for doing what they can with the resources they have. Also, and it's a perfect tie-in, Damian. France might be getting an elite player. Like they don't have an elite player officially yet, but it might be coming with Arthur Fees winning. He being the guy. 2004 birth year, wins his second 500 level title of the year. He won in Hamburg on clay, beats Sasha Zverev in that event. He wins a banger of a match against his fellow countryman Hugo Humbert, saves match points and saves a match point to do so. I just want to run through this before we start the Arthur Fees discussion, Damian. He beats Ben Shelton, Holger Rune, and Hugo Humbert. And there wasn't an easy match in there. He did things the hard way, maybe not the most efficient at times, but what I saw, and I'll turn it over to you, but what I saw in this match was a kid that has a lot of mettle, that was able to battle through maybe not his best, maybe some health issues, maybe some circumstances that weren't going for him, calls, what have you. He found a way. And at this level, at the very top, sometimes that's all that matters, is just finding a way and performing when it's all on the line. Props to Arthur Fees, but what did you see from this run that stood out the most from the Frenchman getting the title?
Yeah, I mean, both runs, I guess, he's had this year have featured these insane wins. I mean, Hamburg final obviously was 3 hours and 30 minutes against Zverev. And yeah, it is progress. I was thinking about him when I said that France hasn't had an elite player in a while. I was thinking, well,
Yeah,
Arthur Feels. And yeah, I think his top game has always been that good. It's just really a matter of applying it better and becoming more consistent. And this run, I mean, you mentioned the 3 wins that he got from the quarters, but it started from the top seed, right? Taylor Fritz as well. And certainly it was not efficient. I mean, Shelton was already like with some hampered movement in the second set, and he could have closed it out in 2. But then it doesn't become this memorable, so maybe you wouldn't be talking about it as much. And the same with Rune, really. Like if Fields wasn't like basically dead at the end of these matches, we wouldn't really be talking about it. And I think this win today over Humbert, like that was just the most impressive of the bunch. Because this was the one where, yeah, he was not in a winning position. He was also in a matchup that, previously was completely unsuccessful for him. And I think he's got pretty much 2 of these like nemesis right now. So Arnaldi, of course, and also Humbert. This one maybe I found even more oppressive. Like when I was watching this today in the first set, I was just thinking, how is he going to win this?
He's pushing him corner to corner. He's just pushing him corner to corner, like repeatedly.
Yeah, I mean, Fields is not used to being on the defense this much, right?
No, 6-0 in finals was Hugo too before this happened. So props to Fees for figuring out a way and staying in it. A very dangerous hardcourt player. I wonder, a lot of times we have these conversations, Damian, about players that show potential. Could they challenge? Could they get to that next level? It's hard to know until they are tested against the very best with stakes on the line. But you're starting to see the ingredients from Arthur, the way he competes, the way he's not really an excuses guy. I'm with you completely that maybe there's definitely some things that he needs to clean up when he gets to the higher levels. But I'm seeing the ingredients in a young player that just gets out there and competes like there's no tomorrow and is willing to suffer to do it. So that was the most encouraging thing for me watching it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, mentally today, especially, that was just such a stunning performance. The fact that he was able to come back in that, match point down in that point in the tie break, 3-4, low 40 was it in the second set as well. I mean, just a few times he was basically out of the match in a matchup that, just doesn't suit him at all. He's so limited on the offense against Humbert and just has to work with a ball that he doesn't really like. And we previously saw with Arnaldi, it just sort of became even worse for him with every single match. And with Humbert, he was able to take that step even though he was so tired. And that's huge because obviously the other elements are there in terms of the game, like the athletic potential, the forehand, which is already the heaviest on tour. I don't really know how it can improve, to be honest, because it's already pretty much the best on tour. So I think with experience as well, if he's able to handle players like this, like players he doesn't enjoy facing, like he did today, like literally like a champ, like that's exactly what he needed. Of course there's going to be people who are going to say like, I mean, he's already won an ATP 500 in Hamburg, so is that really progress? But I mean, he's won 2 ATP 500s in 3 months, so I think so. And also along with the Wimbledon run, it's all looking like 2025 could be an absolutely massive year for him. Does he have Grand Slam winning potential? It's possible. As you said, we never really know until we fully see it, but it's certainly not beyond him.
No, they're coming up though. You got a title for Fees, born in '04. Jerry Shang won recently, '05. This next generation's coming. And again, Ugo Humbert on hard courts. I told several people, watch out for him. He's always very live on this surface. So we're gonna move along here with Damian Kust here on Tennis Channel Inside In. A lot to break down. Japan and the Challenger Tour as well. Other players in this tournament, some of those names that I mentioned that didn't make the deepest runs. A lot of it had to do with Arthur Fees being in the way, but what's your thoughts, Damian, on where Holger Rune is at right now? Because he's a much talked about player. He's put himself in a class that maybe the rest of the tennis population isn't ready to say he's in yet. I thought that match against Arthur was entertaining. It was competitive. He left some points on the table, obviously lost the match. But where are we at right now with Holger as he looks to finish out 2024 into the next year?
You know, I had so much belief in Holger when he was like coming up onto the tour. I don't know if I thought he was like right beside Alcaraz, but I mean, obviously the same bear fear, a little bit of a different trajectory, but still he was keeping up with him for at least a while. And it just seemed like this would be the rivalry that kind of decides the, you know, everything in men's tennis. And of course, Sinner just said no, sorry, Holger. But now Rune, I think, would even be, if he would even love to be back, like, I don't know, in May 2023, when he was making these ATP thousands finals, right? And like, since it doesn't feel like he's made much progress, I think a lot of that is due to the like lack of stabilization in his coaching team as well. It's just clear that he is a guy who needs guidance. I don't really mind him being like, you know, a bit of a villain character, or sometimes being a little, I don't know, angry on the court. He's still like kind of it. And in general, I feel like if you have the talent to back it up, and he does, that's not really a thing for me if you're like a bit bratty. But at the same time, like, it's been a while now since he hasn't progressed. So I think if we don't see anything crazy in like 2025, I will start losing some of that belief. That's for sure. I mean, I would love to see him playing again, like, you know, Paris. What a ridiculous record as well. 5 top 10 wins in one event. And I would love to see that guy. And he has it in him. Like, I think his game is so complete, so versatile. Maybe some slight technical deficiencies on the forehand. I mean, if it doesn't work on the day, then he sometimes just descends into this absolutely horrible tank mode, like against, I don't know, Marozsan this year or Nakashima last year. And there's just a lot that he needs to figure out, I think, mentally. Tough to do that as well if you don't have like good support around you, which I guess to an extent he does, but maybe just hasn't had that sort of like stable voice. And I just hope he does it, because he's definitely like a massive addition to the tour. If he could like not maybe like match Alcaraz and Sinner, because right now that seems pretty far off, but just be competitive with them. And he's been competitive when he's playing them. He's just not really getting to play them all that much recently.
That last part is huge, because at the end of the day, and there were signs in this match, there's signs in other matches, but it's about results. It's about finding a way to win, advance to get to these rivalry matches. I've noticed the consistency thing. I think everyone has, Damian, but the other thing that I just hope that he improves on is, you can call it match preparation or being ready to play, but there are times when the match starts and he's in a hole really fast. So maybe it's part of being a professional. Again, he's so young still, has a lot of time to get there. But the flip side of that is Sinner and Alcaraz have put so much distance between the field that they're not going to stop improving themselves. So I'm with you. I think the game's there, has the ability to rise and play with anybody, but it's not going to get any easier. And those guys aren't going to wait for him. They're not going to hold their hand and be like, come on, get here. Like, they're moving on to the next level too. So we'll see. This was an opportunity, though, with the seeds out, that Fees got the better of them in a match and a draw that opened up.
Yeah, I mean, it still was a decent tournament for him. I think especially the way he looked against Tabilo in the opening round. That was a match where like kind of both were desperate for a win. Tabilo was on a huge losing streak. I mean, he still is, because he lost to Rune. And Holger also kind of needed this, I think, after the Hangzhou loss to Uchiyama, where he just looked so confused, and also Nakashima, how he blew him off the court in at the US Open. So I think both really needed it. And you could see that, well, Rune is like controlling the match completely. And he's maybe even more like battling his own demons rather than Tabilo. Tabilo was there, but it was a whole different battle. So I think all in all, it's still very positive that he got through that one and played much better as the week progressed. But I mean, it's not like a loss to Fields here is going to end his career. It's still a step forward. It's just kind of, he needs more of that. He needs
Yeah.
basically more of what he's done this week.
Last question I have for you before we move on from Japan. When we look at this maybe a year from now, let's say, are we going to be looking at a Ben Shelton that takes the leap? Like, do you think he will be able to take that next step in the next year? He's kind of right around where he was. The results quite haven't been there. Loses the Tiafoe at the U.S. Open. Still so much to love about his game. But what do you think the next 12 months look like for Shelton?
Yeah, so after 2023, I was thinking this year was pretty much going to be how it is right now. So like he's going to be a little more consistent, but I just don't know if, semis at the US Open, quarters in Australia, like if that's going to happen. But ultimately, I think that means that he is moving in the right direction. I mean, yeah, it's just so obvious, how he's going to win points, how he's going to win matches, how he should be a pain in the ass basically for any top player if he faces them. And I think that's kind of what he needed. I mean, Shelton was such a a breakthrough out of basically nowhere, in the sense that before 2023 he didn't even play, never even left the US, right? So he didn't really go through the junior system or anything like that. So I think it was all super new to him. Obviously, playing on clay or grass was also very new to him because he had never left the US. So maybe a year like this, where he's kind of just getting more steady, is also important. I would be surprised if we see him lower than he is right now in 2025. Right. Maybe that's what I'm going to say. Top 10 debut would be a great goal, I think, for next year. Let's not sort of go a little for too much, but I think top 10 is just a very realistic expectation for him to get there at some point at least. And yeah, I just don't think he's going to be decreasing. He's not going to be declining from here. That's pretty much impossible. I think this year is maybe what we can just get in terms of being a bit more steady, staying at that level, and probably not going below it. I don't really see how that would happen.
Yeah, more consistent this year, you're right, but just the major results last year weighted the rankings. So we have seen improvements, even though the ranking might not tell you that specifically. All right, well, Damian Kust, let's get to some Challenger stuff too, because I wanted to ask you a specific bit of questions and just have a general convo about where we are now. And I think it goes without saying, for some of the fans and listeners out there that watch the Pro Tour and aren't as versed in the Challenger game as yourself or maybe others are, they don't quite understand just how vital this time of year is. So if you could kind of speak on to where, post US Open, people think, okay, it's a lull, there's a wall, there's certainly a professional fatigue, if you will, but there's still a lot of great tournaments, and then there's a lot of opportunity, not just win money, win ranking points, but really set yourself up for 2025.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of players in that, I don't know, 80 to 120 ranking range right now, it's just all about the Australian Open main draw. It's pretty insane in tennis, actually. And I mean, lower down also the Australian Open qualifying. It's pretty insane how in tennis we have this huge gap basically between making the slams and not making the slams, either main draw or qualifying, really. If you're not making slam qualifying, you're probably losing money. So yeah, that's the goal for so many players right now, to just get there up until the end of the season. We're going to see some players, I don't know, choose to play. Usually, okay, we're going to see a guy who's ranked 80, who's usually going to just be playing main tour events, and then he chooses to have a streak of I don't know, 3 challenger appearances at the end of the year to secure it. Last year, let's say Taro Daniel did it to a great extent. I think he went at least the semifinals in all 3 events he played. It was Matsuyama, Sydney, and Playford. I think he won Sydney, and he secures the top 100. In 2022, that was, for example, the season of Marton Fucsovics being a little depressed because of that Wimbledon situation where he couldn't defend his quarterfinal points. So he decides to drop down. He wins that Bratislava Challenger. And that's kind of, we're going to see a lot of that. Also this year, of course, there's been a rule change where there's more points per round in ATP Tour events, but less in Challengers. So actually, I think by the end of the year, we're also going to have a lot of players trying 25Ks and trying to play in ITFs, because suddenly they're also a bit more valuable and trying to secure their qualifying for the Australian Open like that. So yeah, I think actually the last 2 months of the season are some of the most entertaining for sure. We have 5 events every single week, I think, on the Challenger Tour. Asia, this week we don't have a challenger in Asia, while first week of Shanghai is going. But after that, there's going to be an Asian challenger every week. I think there's just one week where there's just 1 week where a European challenger isn't going to take place. But even in the last week of the season, we're going to have 5 events. I don't remember something like that, honestly. I'm not sure if it ever happened. Yeah, it's the last week of November, and usually it was like 2, 3. Last year it was 4, and now they also added some Mexican challengers in the last couple of weeks, and yeah, it's taken it up to 5. So basically, yeah, people think that ATP Tour finals, Davis Cup finals, the season is over, but no, it's not. I mean, realistically, tennis goes on like 365 days a year. Of course, the ITFs, unfortunately, that are played during Christmas, they usually don't have streaming, so we can't watch them. But if you're a Challenger fan, there's only 1 month, literally, when you don't have anything to watch. And I feel like not many people, not many even like, hardcore tennis fans know how accessible it is, how it is all, available for free, every single court. And yeah, just as you said, I mean, how good it is as well is definitely something that people aren't aware of.
I'm going to need to re-listen to that, take some notes, and really map out my gear with all those events and then point changes. But no, it's exciting stuff. And it made me think of something else, Damian. Do you have a strong opinion, strong positive, negative on, the Challenger events that are now kind of working in congruence with these extended Masters events? Because we see it obviously in Phoenix in the United States, but you mentioned Shanghai, another Asian Challenger that second week. What do you think about the Challengers now kind of going hand in hand with some of these now that all the Masters 1000 events are 2 weeks long?
I mean, I think it's a good partnership, It's maybe not necessarily for the players that usually feature on the Challenger Tour, which I understand can be a bit of an issue for someone, like that this rule change doesn't really affect the lives of the players, let's say below 150 ranked. It's pretty much, the top 100 plus some players who are going to be in the qualifying. But yeah, I mean, I still think these are one of the most enjoyable events. Phoenix, of course, has always been super strong since its introduction. It's only gotten better with the 175 bump. As for the European ones, I was in Cagliari 1 year ago, because it was only 2023 when the category was introduced. And yeah, I mean, I also enjoyed it greatly. It was definitely one of the more like high-profile challengers in a way. There was an actual press office. I had to talk to somebody to talk to players and stuff, which usually on the Challenger Tour doesn't happen. That might actually sometimes make it a bit more tricky from my perspective. But yeah, still, I mean, it was just a fabulous event on Sardinia. And I think that, yeah, this is only a really good option, because otherwise, like, what are the players going to be in the second weeks of ATP Thousands? It just gives so many players a good option to kind of maintain their rhythm, maybe get back, maybe get back at it after losing early in some of these events. Right now, we're going to have Emma Navarro playing a WTA 125 in Hong Kong, right? And that's kind of a similar thing. Like, it's not a 175 because that category doesn't exist on the WTA Tour, but that's kind of a similar motive. It's just a lot more players can do it on the ATP circuit right now. We only have, of course, ATP 1000, ATP 1, Challenger 175s. I mean, we only have during the second week of Indian Wells, Madrid, and Rome. But yeah, these are definitely some of the most premium challengers you can visit, you can watch. And I think there's really no downsides to this.
That's going to be a big one in Hong Kong. Navarro, Simona Halep's coming back to play in it. We're going to see some big names at the 125 there. Well, 2 men's Challenger players I just want to discuss with you, obviously, because they've been on a heater, to say the least. Jacob Fearnley, we know what he's been doing recently. Wins the Orleans Challenger over Harold Mayotte. And, again, the crowd in that match was awesome. It was really just a spectacle. Good to see that much support at a Challenger event. But Fearnley breaks into the top 100, the British man out of Scottish man, but out of TCU College in the States. 35-5 on the season. And I know you know this, Damian, but just so our audience knows out there, won his last 3 challengers, made the final of the one before that. So he has just been on a heater, and he got his ranking up into what you said was that sweet spot, into the top 100, going to get main drawn to some tournaments. How has he been able to put together just this sustained success on the Challenger Tour, building off of momentum and really rising out of seemingly nothing into the top 100 of the men's rankings?
Honestly, I've never seen anything like that. Like, I know it's vaguely similar to the Shelton rise in 2022, but it's a different thing. Like, Shelton was regarded as a huge prospect already. He didn't play the full college route as well. He dropped out, of course, and it wasn't like certain that he was going to. Fearnley just went the full 4 years, of course, he didn't come like exactly out of the blue, but he was top 10 in the year-end rankings, I think, in college for TCU, of course. Yeah,
Mhm.
but then he suddenly shows up, he wins that Nottingham Challenger and keeps it going. I really have never seen anything like that. I think right now, when it comes to like win rate on the Challenger season, he's of course 23-1 and 27-1 if you want to include qualifying as well. But like even
Mhm.
just strictly main draw, this is the second highest ever for like players who played 20 matches in a season. And that one higher up is 20-0 for Tipsarevic in like 2017, but he was a
Mhm.
former top 10 player. So that's really not a comparison for me. In fact, I really struggle to find a comparison for what he's doing right now. Let's say in 2014, I think David Goffin ended on 20 wins in a row at the challenger level. And then, of course, a couple of years later, he's in the final of the ATP finals. He is in the top 10.
Mhm.
So I'm not saying Fearnley will get there, but like that's maybe more a direct
Oh,
comparison to what he's doing right now. But it's still not quite like that. Of course, we're seeing the college route right now being so much more popular. But for someone to just absolutely demolish the whole pro tour, yeah, it's not really something that could have been expected. It's not something that I think we'll ever see again, like, you know, at least not very quickly. And
Mhm.
yeah, the fact that he still keeps on winning. Of course, there's been some tough matches in the meantime. In Rennes in the final, he had 2 match points to save against Quentin Mallis. But yeah, Orléans especially, it just seemed like he's so far
Yeah.
above anyone. I know that the final got interesting in the second set. Mayo definitely gave a good fight. The crowds, as you mentioned, I mean, France indoor hardcore events, they're always really good there. And Mayo definitely like used that support. But other than that,
Mhm.
like up until that moment, up until when Fearnley wasted 2 match points and then had to come back a few games later, like yeah, up until that moment, again there was no match. Like it was just Jake being far too good. I don't really understand it because I think before this year I was barely aware of the existence of Jacob Fearnley. So
Yeah.
obviously it's very new to me still. He's got such an exciting game
Mhm.
as well with that kind of wrist heavy jack sock
Yeah.
ish, I would say, forehand. And yeah, just would love to see him in more main tour events now. And we're going to. He's going to play, I
Yeah.
think, like Stockholm or Antwerp in that week we have with 3 ATP 250s. Of course, as
Mhm.
you said, like Australian Open is pretty much secured because he's got almost nothing to defend. At the end of last year, he actually played a few ITFs, and I think he won one of them.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, he should be able to cover for that. And it's just such a ridiculous achievement to do it in basically what 3-4 months. By
Yeah.
the end of
Wild.
May, he was still playing college. Middle of June, he wins Nottingham, and yeah, 23-1 in Challenger majors this year is pretty much
Uh,
just yeah, it just doesn't happen. I think Talon Griekspoor is right now on like a 30 match win streak at the Challenger level, but I would still argue that like when he started it, he was in he's just such a
Different. Yeah.
renowned player already that yeah,
Right.
it's
Right.
not the same.
Well, he took that set from Djokovic in
Oh yeah.
Wimbledon. Maybe that gave him some wings to just keep it going. But no, props to him. It's a remarkable achievement, something we haven't seen before. And then the other player I want to get your thoughts on, Learner Tien, what he's doing. The win streak came to an end and he got bounced early recently, but he won 28 matches in the summer, won a challenger after the U.S. Open too in Vegas. So he's been able to just kind of keep things going. But he's a player out here in the United States, Damian, that people are high on, his willingness to compete, and the fact that he's done something in winning multiple challengers at his age. Only players younger to do them. The list is like Fritz, Roddick, Tiafoe, and Query. So those are the company that he's in. But what can you tell us about Leonard Tien and what he's done and his potential on the Challenger Tour and beyond?
Yeah, I think with him it's like a little less certain that the game is suddenly still like going to develop into like proper main
Hmm.
tour quality for now. But he's got so much time, so
Hmm.
crafty, resourceful. I think with time he can definitely also improve. Even when he was like 16, and of course he won Kalamazoo for the first time, gets into the U.S. Open. You could see that for his size, he
Hmm.
does pack a punch. I think it's going to take a while to maybe like learn, no pun intended,
There it is.
for
Yeah.
him
Yeah.
to learn that basically to use that punch in terms of just being able to stay on the attack and be a little more comfortable there. But right now, when he's facing all of these guys who just kind of attack him, like let's say Marozsan did in Winston Salem, so that's actually a main tour event, of course. Like he just, I mean, against these sort of opponents, he just fares extremely well when he kind of
Hmm.
plays intuitively, reactively. And yeah, it's so tough to actually blast through him. Whereas seemingly, a guy with that sort of like not that tall, he should be overpowered by some players, but it's just not really happening. It took such an incredible effort from Tristan Boyer to beat him a couple of days ago. It actually seemed like, it was maybe a bigger match for Tristan because he was kind of developing this Lerner Tien problem, I think, after he almost blew the opening set there. And it just seemed like it's such a massive match for him. Eventually, Lerner was also a little fatigued in the third set, just kind of stopped split stepping at some point. But yeah, I think that for now, it's a game that just fares extremely well at the challenger level for his game. I don't think that he's got quite the edge that Fearnley has right now in terms of just being able to maybe translate it to the very top of the sport at the moment. But that's fine. I mean, Fearnley is like 4 or 5 years older, and he's obviously gone through the full college system. So let's also remember that Lerner missed 3 months this year with an injury. I think it was ribs between February and May. So I think top 100 next year is very doable for him as well. He's just not going to be defending all that much. And yeah, the 28 match win streak, even if 20 of that was at the ITF level, it was still extremely impressive. Like the way he was just dominating all the opponents, and you kind of waited for someone to come in and blast him off the court, but just never happened. It's just something that is very tricky to do against someone who shrinks the court like this and is such a crafty lefty counter puncher already.
Exciting stuff for him. The Challenger Tour at multiple levels never ceases to amaze. Damian Kust, this has been fun. Last question for you. Very important stuff. Everyone out there wants to know. We haven't covered it on the show yet. What did you think of the trailer for the Six Kings event in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think as a trailer, it's pretty good. I watched it.
5 minutes long. 5 minutes long. That's a long trailer.
Okay, I watched it as maybe a stretch. I clicked through it to see how all the players look. So basically, when I saw, Rune's face, I tried to move over to the next player. If I went a bit too far, I had to rewind. So I probably ended up watching like 2 minutes of it. However, I agree with Andy Murray. I don't know if you saw the comments that he had to Liam Brody, but that's kind of my idea about it. Like, this is the event is basically the Mubadala exhibition that was held in December in previous years, and it was in the off season, and I wasn't really watching that. So if there's an exhibition that is going to be happening in October, and there's regular tour events, I'm not really going to be watching that. So that's kind of my feeling on that. I mean, as a trailer, obviously it's something new in tennis. But I feel like Murray is pretty much, I don't know how serious his comment is, because obviously he's got this banter going with Liam.
No, he's definitely sarcastic in a lot of ways. Like, that's his general personality. But
don't you think there's a bit of truth to that? Like
a bit of it, yeah. Definitely, but the Brody interactions in particular is a lot of sarcastic humor. But yes, I agree, and we understand that it is an exhibition. Corentin Moutet actually posted one of the best tweets, which was, "This costs more than the prize money I made all of last year," which I thought was great in general too. But my notes were like, it was so ridiculous. I had to just comment on my highlights of the trailer, and one being about a minute and 20 in, Alcaraz kills someone with a backhand. Just rips a backhand through, takes out a robot. You had Holger Rune's army of Danish pirates get wiped out by Sinner. Medvedev's on an actual bear. They got really meta with it. They had Djokovic with wolves, and they had Nadal like the thing in Fantastic Four. But hey, if it's gonna be a big money event, which these players are all in to make a lot of money to do this, and props to them for getting it, it doesn't shock me that they went all out on production value. Because it's an exhibition, and they want to drum up interest any way that they can. So I understand it. It was absurd in a lot of ways, but absurdity sells, and these players are going. And also, should point out too, Damian, the format is actually interesting because it ensures that you're going to see them all there every day, which was not the case for some of these exhibitions.
Yeah, I think the Mubadala thing works pretty similar in that 2 players were already into the semis, 4 in the quarters, and then they play for like 5th place, 7th place as well. But I don't know. I mean, I don't remember the specifics of it. Yeah, I mean, if it's someone's cup of tea, go watch it. Yeah. Personally, I will try to focus on the more competitive events.
Challenger events. Yeah.
But
we got a lot of tour events.
If there's 5 challenger events a week, I'm going to be pretty displeased with you. if you're watching the Six Kings Slam or whatever it's called. But yeah, I mean, if it's your cup of tea, go ahead. And as a move in terms of like the advertising, I think the trailer is fantastic. Like it definitely got people talking about the event, which is ultimately what it is all about.
Well, unless you have 6 TVs, you can put that on number 6, your challenger events, your tour events, and then just
6 for all the kings, you know, every king on one screen.
Every single one. Damian Kust, this was a blast. What's the next challenger event for you? Where are you going next?
I'm actually not sure. This year I've only had 6 so far. I was planning to make it 8, just like last year, and I think also in 2022, but probably gonna stick to 7. Right now I've been a bit busy with some, other tennis related work, so I'm kind of maybe thinking that after the ATP finals would be a good idea for me. There are 2 weeks basically. I think in both of these weeks there's going to be 2 European events, so I will have some choices. But I'm thinking of an event in Spain. I've never been to Spain yet, and it seems like a pretty nice goal in terms of the Challenger Tour as well. And it's still reasonably affordable from here. So I think either Montemar or Maspalomas, which are the 2 Spanish challengers after the ATP finals. Which one? I'm probably going to wait for the entry lists. That's where I stand right now.
Well, that's exciting stuff. Appreciate you coming on the podcast. It was a blast getting to chat with you about the Challenger Tour, about Tokyo, and about everything else in between. Damian Kust, welcome. Hope you enjoyed your stay here on Tennis Channel Inside In. All the best.